Alright everybody, last round of the world update of 2016. My 29 miscellaneous, nothing really going on in here. Just shot a little bit of video this week of my frogs and a little bit of the loaches on the bottom. About time to do another water change. You can see the water level's a little bit low. It's probably about time to do a top off in there. Again, this is my tank that just sort of ticks over. I did lose a white cloud mountain minnow this week out of this tank. I found it floating in the water sprite there to the left yesterday morning. So as time goes on and the smaller fish die off, I think it's been 2 years since I put those white clouds in there. So, you know, I might add some neons or I might add some more white clouds back to it at some point. But for now, you know, just ticking over, not really a whole lot going on in this tank. It's just kind of one of my workhorses. It just sits there and does its thing every day. So, we get to my Gourami tank. Likewise, not a lot going on in there this week. I did do a water change recently. I think it's been a little while since I've done my last round of the world update, so I might have done more than it seems like I've done. I got in there and I thinned out the water sprite. It's already growing back considerably. It's really thick on the left there. I also trimmed up the temple plant really thoroughly, and this temple plant here is what I'm talking about. And the Java fern there on the left was really getting thick, and there was some additional growth on that, and I wound up cutting a big chunk out of that to open the tank up as well. So the tank is nice and open. I did find my Farlowella catfish in there recently, and I thought I had found 2 of them. So if you hadn't been following along with that little saga, it turns out that I was seeing the same one, simply in different places of the tank. And long story short, I only have 1 of them in there, and the other one that I originally put in probably did not survive, as I suspected way back, you know, like a year ago whenever I put him in there. And speaking of which, I've been looking around for the thing, and he is right there on the glass in the front of the tank. It's not very often we get to see the Farlowella like that. So there's a little bit of a look at the underside and the sucker mouth of a Farlowella or a twig catfish. Pretty cool. I also shot a video this week where I talked about the differences between algae eaters and off-wax grazers. So if you caught that video, having a good look at that fish's mouth like that gives you a very good idea of what an off-wax grazer's mouth looks like. It's that sucker mouth that more or less attaches to and then scrapes a surface clean. That was a good example of that. So the only thing I've got going on here in the Angelfish tank, and I can really not get quite in front of the tank. This is a very spur of the moment video. The room's a mess. I got drips and runs on half the tanks. I just decided, since it's the end of the year, I would shoot one final round the world update and call it good. This tank, I had one of my fixtures burned out on the back, and the last video I shot only had one of the fixtures lit, and now I have both of them lit again. And I just replaced the tubes in one of the fixtures. I'm about to replace the tubes in the other. So I have 2 brand new 6400K T5s in the one unit, and then the second unit I have older tubes. They're about a year old. So look at the difference that makes, and look how brightly lit this tank is. It's just fantastic. So I will show you that, and then this is what it was looking like with only the single fixture lit on it. That's probably about what you'd expect to look, or expect to see when you look in a fish tank. That's a single Coralife unit. It's a 4-foot twin tube T5 unit. And I would imagine you're probably, intended to put a single unit across the top of your tank like that. But I like it nice and brightly lit, and I have 2 of them here. So, well, I can't turn it back on. It's got a fail-safe in it that if it's hot and it gets shut off of power outage, or if you turn it off, you've got to actually let it cool down before it'll turn back on. So we're going to be down 1 light for about the next 15 minutes. But that's okay, because that's really all I've got going on in this tank. Anyway, my Black Ghost knife fish tank, I did a really big water change and plant removal, and I wiped the glass down and I just got in there and I did a ton of tank maintenance. Nothing special, just regular old tank maintenance. I just did a lot of it at once, and I removed an awful lot of not only this Java fern here that's growing on this piece of woodwork, but I removed a lot of mats of cyanobacteria that were growing in it. Now you can see some of the cyanobacteria is still growing in clumps on, that's actually braided fishing line. It's not your standard monofilament line, it's a braided line, and it's incredibly strong. I had tied some stuff onto that wood years ago, and it has long ago rotted away, but the fishing line is still there, and that's what that algae, or that blue-green slime algae, it's often called, but it's actually cyanobacteria. That's what that is attached to. And we're not looking at that thing right in front of us. We're looking at that piece all the way in the back that has that sort of green fuzzy stuff growing on those pieces of string. That is cyanobacteria. I did save a few of the clumps of that, a few of the mats, and I have them in a container in the other room, and I am going to shoot some video specifically about that cyanobacteria. Give you a good look at it so you can identify it readily. I also, speaking of that plant, one of my viewers did identify it for me. Spirula or something like that. I can't remember what it was called, but I have no idea where that came from. I don't ever remember putting it on this piece of wood. I just started seeing some green develop on that wood about 6 or 8 months ago, and it turned into little leaves, and now it's turned into that. And I have no idea where it came from or how it got in there, unless I put it in there way back in the day and then completely forgot about it, and it somehow has hung on and struggled and finally taken off and come around and is starting to grow again. And I suppose that's possible because if you look, you see these little things. These are Anubias. Those were great big old Anubias plants when I planted them years ago, and they've, I thought they died and went away, and eventually they've come back as little tiny, they almost look like dwarf Anubias. These are the same way. These have actually come back pretty good. But those are Anubias that have been in this tank since I put it up 3 years ago, and they've almost dwarfed. They've almost sort of grown into being dwarf Anubias. It's kind of strange. So who knows? Maybe I did plant that, whatever that thing is up there, and in this case I am talking about this little piece right here. Maybe I did plant it in there, and it's just sort of hung on and grew, and I never really noticed it, and it's finally getting big enough for me to see. Whatever it is, it's really cool. I really like it. So I'm happy with the way this tank is rolling along. I feel like it's finally getting settled in and starting to do well, and it's taken a couple of years for it to finally sort of settle in and get into its stride. So for this tank, we've got a long way to go. I've just set this one up recently, as you know, or as most of you probably know, a lot of my viewers do. This is my new native tank. I'm still, waiting on springtime, I guess, until I can get some stock in there, or at least I'm waiting for some other options. Right now, going out and fishing, I have found is not an option for ways to stock this tank. But I'm also getting issues with my algae starting to develop. You can see here on this wood, and now that rock there, last time I shot a video of this, that rock looked all bright white, and it was washing the camera out with white. Now it is washing the camera out with green, and the glass is all green. And of course down here where I've got this new power head, you can see all those beautiful flowing lines. So definitely have the Spirogyra green hair algae in this tank, and it grows really, really rapidly. I'm going to have issues with that in this tank, so I don't know exactly how I'm going to deal with those issues yet, but I will. I'm not worried about it. It's only algae. I don't mind algae in the tank, and once I get my stock sorted out and I get some fish in there that actually enjoy eating algae, they will have something to eat. And quite frankly, as I said, that's kind of beautiful. It's almost hypnotic watching it in the current of my brand new power head that I recently installed. So plenty more to come on that tank. My snail tank is just my snail tank. Obviously it's just sitting there with snails in it. I feed them to my puffer. Excuse me. This is my T-bar / gudgeon tank, and I have 6 Marcy rainbow fish in there. I have recently added a couple of rubber lip plecos. Some people call those rubber nose plecos. They're doing a good job. They're really earning their keep so far. If you'll remember, if you follow along, the back glass, when I put them in there about a week ago, the back glass was just covered in brown diatoms and green algae. The front glass even had a bunch of stuff growing on it. So that's all gone. The rocks are getting nice and cleaned up. Even the leaves on a lot of these temple plants here were starting to get sort of boogered up with the algae growing on them. I've actually removed a few that had some green slime, the cyanobacteria. Look, you can see one back there, that leaf right there that has that green on it. That's the cyanobacteria. So I'll get in there and I'll pluck that leaf out, and that'll remove a large part of that cyanobacteria. Again, it's a single-celled organism, so pulling it out of the tank, as soon as I break it, if a single cell breaks loose and goes adrift in the water, I didn't get it out of the tank. It's still in the tank. But you can keep on top of it easily enough by doing that. That whole batch of plants right there is probably going to come out altogether. It really is disrupting the way the water flows through the tank. I'm not happy with it at all. Again, you can see I'm always left with this sort of pile of crud right there, and that's just where it sort of gets dropped and dumped. So I don't think we're going to leave that the way it is. This tank is still a work in progress. This tank never really had any direction to begin with. I've always sort of just kind of hodgepodge this together as I went, and it's sort of shaping up nicely and developing into a nice tank. But I really still feel like I've got a long way to go on this tank before it sort of settles in and becomes whatever it really is going to become. I still kind of feel like this tank is in flux. So stay tuned for more on this one as well. My 125, I did, let me get over here for this one. I did a little bit of impromptu pruning in there last night. I haven't done a water change. I didn't get in and wipe the glass down or anything like that. I just got in there and removed a bunch of the water sprite in the middle on the top. It was a little more careful this time. If you watch my last video when I did a water change on this tank, I got in there and I really butchered it up, but I sort of did it haphazardly, and I cut a few pieces out that I really didn't want to cut out. This time I went in there much more carefully, and I really removed the pieces that were just where I didn't want them. They were sort of clumping the middle up and blocking a lot of the water flow, blocking a lot of the light, but not really adding anything to the visual aesthetics of the plant, so there was no point in leaving them in there, and I just trimmed them out. We are in the process of growing these branches out. You can see how sort of twisted and thick they are. Those are pretty new. That one right there has not even grown back down into the water. That's still twisted up and out, but as time goes on, that will straighten out and it'll start coming down and filling in this end of the tank a little more. In the meantime, I went in and I cleaned out some of the dead roots and some of that sort of mucky looking stuff in the middle. You can see a lot of new root growth on there, so that's a good sign. Again, this plant is just vigorous and healthy. It's probably lacking some sort of nutrient. I doubt that twisted curl in the stems is normal. That usually is the sign of some sort of trace mineral deficiency or whatever. And when you're free floating in the water and you're not rooted into the substrate, unless you're adding trace minerals to the water. No, there goes my odd couple again. Unless you're adding trace minerals to the water, a floating plant will not be able to get any of those little trace minerals. So that could be something like a manganese deficiency or something like that, or a zinc deficiency might cause that weird twisting in the leaves like that or in the stems like that. So whatever, I'm not worried about it. It still looks good. It still grows really vigorously, and that's all I'm really worried about. The other thing I wanted to point out with this tank, and it's actually going to be another video separately, but I do want to talk about it momentarily with this tank, and that's my other plants in this tank. If you'll notice, a lot of them don't look nearly as good as they used to, and as time goes on, a lot of them are sort of fading away. These two swords right here, couldn't think of the word, are definitely looking pretty rough, but I am getting new growth. But you'll notice, see how little tiny those new leaves are coming in? This happens with a lot of my tanks, and I've got my theories as to what's going on and why, and again, we will do a video about that here in the very near future. But start looking at my tanks when you start looking towards the plants. I know everybody thinks my tanks look all lush and green, and a lot of them do in a lot of ways. But there's also a lot of plants that never really do well, and they always look sort of spindly and look like they're struggling to hang on, and there's reasons for that. So we'll get into that, and we'll shoot another video discussing my plants. So moving on to my brackish tank, nothing really to talk about in here. Did shoot some video on this tank this week. It wasn't specifically about this tank. I was talking about tannins and tannic acid and how it stains your water and so on and so forth. And this was one of the tanks I used because, as you may or may not be able to tell, there's a fair amount of tannins in this tank, and they stem from the roots of the plant here and any of the decaying leaf material. You'll see a lot of that leaf material, if I can do this without freaking butterbean out too badly. You see how a lot of that plant material is sort of dead and the edges of the leaves are dying off, and you know, as that breaks down, that releases lots and lots of tannins into the water. So you don't really need wood or woodwork in your tank to actually get those brown stains. Simply having a planted tank in a lot of cases can do that, especially it depends on how vigorous you are on your maintenance. If you have a high maintenance schedule, you may not even notice that you're getting the tannins building up. If you've got a maintenance schedule like me, you will probably notice tannins building up. So that's all that's going on in this tank, really. I'm really happy with the new tank. If you'll remember my old brackish tank, it was just a mess. I actually, at the time, I liked the 20 long and the open top. Now that he's in this tank and it's a little more compact but taller, I actually do like it a lot better, and he seems to enjoy going in and out of those caves a lot more. I just get the impression he's a lot more comfortable and secure in this tank. He's always white, his belly's always nice and bright white. I don't get any of that sort of graying out color that I used to get. So I think he's a lot happier now that he's moved, and that makes me happy because butterbean's awesome. He's probably my favorite fish. Oh, moving on to my quarantine tank. Got a lot to talk about in this tank, but I'm not going to do it in this video. I will give you the cliff notes in this video. I did a video recently where I talked about making, let me move this bucket out of the way. Again, I did zero preparation for this video. I picked my camera up and here we are, 17 and a half minutes later. I did a video recently about impulse purchases, and I had purchased 3 coolie loaches and some Rasbora hets. I came home, I brought them home, I slapped them in a tank, I threw this tank together, uncycled, new filter, and that should not have been an issue because I spiked the filter with some filter material from another tank and so on and so forth. And long story short, I know darn right well how to cycle a tank, and I know how to do it with fish, and I know how to do it with sensitive fish in it. I made a mistake in the process. I had a lapse in judgment or memory, whatever you want to call it. I actually just sort of forgot about the tank for a mere, I don't know, 15 hours or something. And in that time, the ammonia levels rose high enough that it did enough damage that I lost the loaches that were in here. I have purchased new loaches. I have them in there. They're probably hiding at the moment. But I'm not too worried about it. I've been keeping an eye on the tank. My ammonia's sort of leveled out down to 0. The nitrites have leveled out down to 0. So I think I've, finally got the tank sorted out. But I do want to do a video, and I want to talk about not only the mistake I made and the impulse purchase and why impulse purchases are bad and they lead to these kinds of problems. Look, there's one of those loaches in the back. But I want to talk about the nitrogen cycle again, and I want to talk about how to cycle a tank with fish in it while preserving the fish and not killing them, because you can do it, but you've got to be really meticulous about it, and you've got to test your water, test your water, test your water, and test your water several times a day. You've got to watch your water like a mother hen. And I forgot to do it before going to bed one night, and then I forgot again the following morning, and it hit me like a thunderbolt about lunchtime. Oh my God. And I went and checked, and I had about 1 part per million ammonia buildup by that point, and that's a lot of ammonia. So the damage was done, and a day later I lost the loaches. So look forward to a video going into much more depth about that topic as well. Last but not least, my crayfish tank, my resurrected crayfish tank. I was pretty much done with it for the year. you know, ready to throw the crayfish back in the stream or something. And the other day I noticed they were moving around again. In fact, he's sitting out right now, sort of. The big one, that's the one with the one claw. I have seen the other one. I've seen them both at the same time, so I know I still have 2 crayfish in here. And the more thought I've given it, the more likely I think I am to actually put these crayfish in my new native tank and just make them part of that community. They will probably wind up getting some or all of the shiners that are in there by springtime. You know, little by little, one by one, they're going to get picked off and eaten, because crayfish are pretty good hunters. I know they don't look like it, but they will snag fish right out of mid-swim. And once they grab them, that's it. They've been grabbed and they don't let go. So we might do that. I think I'm probably going to. I kind of want to thin the population of those minnows out by springtime anyway, if not get rid of them altogether. So this might be just sort of a natural solution that will give us a topic of discussion. It might be a little controversial, but, you know, that's how things work. This is a native tank. I've known all along that it's going to be an aggressive tank. There's going to be fish in there that eat other fish. There's going to be fish that eat the crayfish. At some point probably. So if you're squeamish about that kind of stuff, maybe my native tank is not going to be the tank for you. But as you just saw, I've got lots and lots of tanks around this room, and by far most of them are nice, happy, friendly community tanks, which is the way I like them. So thanks for joining me on this Round the World update. Again, this was the last one of 2016. Good riddance to bad rubbish. It's been an awful year. I don't imagine 2017 will get any better, but you never know. Wish us luck. Thanks again for watching. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. See you real soon on the next one. Thanks again for watching this one.